Mike Sullivan's going to speak today in Las Vegas, and just so that it doesn't look like hindsight, I'm going to share in advance what I hope to hear from him. Good morning to you. Good Friday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is Daily Shot of Penguins. Comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates in the same place that you found this. Tonight's the NHL draft, which of course has very little bearing on the local franchise. No picks until the second round when there's two of them at numbers 44 and 46. However, this has been the day in the recent past that Sullivan's spoken with reporters. Now, he is a lock to do that today, albeit in a different capacity as the head coach of the U.S. entry in the 2026 Milan Olympics. And depending on how that goes, you never know. Sometimes there are parameters set for these types of things where they say, hey, listen, we respect that all you have a job to do, meaning the reporters, but this press conference is being called by the U.S. Olympic Committee, and we'd appreciate if you would just stick to Olympic questions, whatever. So we'll see how that goes. One way or another, over the course of the weekend, Sullivan is going to answer questions about the Penguins. You can take that to the bank. He's anything but the type to run from accountability, especially after what I think everybody would acknowledge was a pretty challenging year for all concerned, including the head coach. But here's what I want. This is in advance, and this is also acknowledging that I won't be there. I'll be in Atlanta covering Pirates versus Braves. I'm flying there later this morning. But what I want to hear is, everybody, listen to me. I watched every millisecond of footage from my Pittsburgh Penguins over these past few weeks. And I, the head coach, the second longest tenured head coach in the league, behind only John Cooper, my Canadian counterpart here, have put all that experience and all that wisdom to good use, and I have found what was wrong with our power play. I have uncovered it. And from there, he would proceed to at least give something of an answer. It doesn't have to be something where he rolls a player under the bus. Like, for example, Evgeny Malkin is just killing us out there. We can't have him on the first unit anymore. Too many giveaways. Doesn't work out well at the left point anymore. Missing the net too often. Not feeding guys in front. I would not expect anything of the kind from Sullivan, even if it were the case. However, the power play's problems weren't all Gino's fault, as we all know. Gino didn't help, but there was a lot more, or should I say a lot less, to it. Nor would I expect, by the way, for him to get into personnel. He's not going to roll out PP1 right there at a draft day press conference. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online, your number one source for all your summer sports needs this season, from Major League Baseball, golf, NHL, NBA playoffs. Get the latest odds and lines, including all team matchups, player props, odds on just about everything that's out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. But I'd like to hear once and for all, since this was never sufficiently addressed, even though it was asked over the final month of the season, what took 5 months to get the bumper play into the mix? I asked that question myself and never really got what I considered to be a thorough answer to it. And that's not like him. That tells me that there was something off. Maybe it was something related to the players. Maybe it was something related to Todd Reirden, neither of whom he'd be sideswiping in any way. And, he might just go back to the early point in the season where they did try the bumper play, only it was with Rickard Rakell, who just couldn't handle it, and it didn't last long. I'm talking about a game and a half at the most. For reasons I really didn't understand, Rax just couldn't handle it. He would back up, but he wouldn't put himself into a trigger spot. Nobody took him seriously, so he wasn't able to draw anybody out, and thus both components of the bumper play were killed on the spot. Whereas When Michael Bunting came along, he was on the other side. He presented a viable target. He occasionally took the shot. Heck, a couple of times he scored on that shot, but other times would just bump in and out, hence bumper play, and he'd pull apart the opponent's penalty kill so that the Penguins could do what Erik Karlsson behind the scenes had been urging them to do, pleading with them to do for months. That finally happened when Bunting came along. What happened there? Was that politics? Was that players versus coaches? Was that coach versus coach? You wouldn't think it'd be a lack of awareness of how effective that play is when almost every power play in the league was deploying some variety of it. And from there, was that it? Because the one thing that you can't do anymore, if you're Sullivan, is give the standard, we just needed to get more pucks and more bodies to the net nonsense, because they did that like crazy in the final 2 months. They really did. I stopped 100% criticizing them on that over the final 2 months of the season because I was watching the games. I saw what they were doing. They were trying it. It just didn't work. They didn't finish. They didn't come close to finishing on a lot of these power plays. Normally at these draft sessions with Sullivan, I'll be honest with you, there's a lot more to ask than there would be this year. There's personnel stuff. Do you see such and such new acquisition fitting with Sid or Gino? Those kinds of questions. Nothing's really changed. Nothing much about this roster since season's end. And it's not like the Alex Nedeljkovic extension is going to get Sullivan to say, well, that's great. I've now officially had enough of Tristan Jarry and we're going to rocket him on out of here. He's not going to do that. To me, from the coaching perspective, what he's got to answer for is the power play. He's now had a lot of time to look back at what went wrong, and it matters. When we come back, J1Q. Today's J1Q comes from Paul, who asks, DK, why not just have Alex Nedeljkovic and Joel Blomqvist be the goaltending tandem for the coming season? And Paul, I have no doubt that Kyle Dubas considered this. If you recall, immediately after the Penguins were eliminated, before getting to Long Island, Dubas made a trip to Wilkes-Barre to watch that team participate in the Calder Cup playoffs, and he did so with a specific aim of seeing how Blomqvist would rise to the challenge. So the series was over super fast. Nothing could have been determined about anything in one direction or the other. And, Blomqvist is still really young. And when you're talking about someone in his early 20s who's only got 1 year of North American professional hockey, to his credit, even though he was an AHL All-Star, even though he did check a lot of boxes, that does not make him ready for the NHL. Also, and relevant, maybe most relevant, if and when you do bring Blomqvist to Pittsburgh, it had better be with either a starting role in mind or a shared role in mind, because the last thing that you'd want to do with a prospect in any sport is have them sit and watch. That's a great way to stunt development. And that, honestly, right now in the scenario that you describe, without having seen anybody performing at training camp, if you entered that camp with just Nedeljkovic and Blomqvist as your goaltenders, if you traded Tristan Jarry, which I'm sure is what you're getting at, you'd do so in putting both of your goaltenders into positions to which they're not accustomed. Remember, and I love Ned as much as anybody, and especially love what he did over the final month, but he faded. Okay? I'm not telling you anything I wouldn't say to him. He faded. Whether it was physical, whether it was mental, whether it was some combination, he faded. Is that an unfair criticism? Yeah, probably. In this day and age of hockey, you don't see goaltenders going 14, 15 straight games the way he did, not to mention high-stakes games, back-to-back nights, road trips. But the fact is, he faded. So you're going to see a situation, I believe, where Nedeljkovic and Blomqvist would have to share the net. And I think that this one is way more about Blomqvist than anything else. What you don't want to do, and this is one of the few things that Ron Hextall ever got right as a general manager. Maybe it's because he was also a world-class goaltender, but he was the only person in Philadelphia who didn't want to rush Carter Hart. The only one. Everybody else was like, get him up, because the Flyers couldn't find any goalies. And he ends up getting overruled and fired and whatever else. The Flyers bring up Hart, and look, I know he's got all kinds of other off-the-ice issues right now, but on the ice, he got messed up. I don't think anybody can dispute that. He got messed up. And maybe the same thing would have happened to Matt Murray, too, if Murray hadn't come up in the midst of a championship run with what obviously was a championship roster. The Penguins don't have very many prospects. The last thing they can afford to do is mess up the ones they have. I appreciate the question. I appreciate the intent behind the question. I really do. I've thought about that myself. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Penguins. And we're going to do another one of these on Monday.